Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for the quietness so far. Welcome. We're just waiting until a few more people come in. Quickly to introduce myself, my name is Keisha Preisleben, and I'm an advisor for the Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings project, and we'll be co-moderating the session with Nisha. I pass over to him.
Yeah, hi everyone as well. I'm also advisor with the Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings project. And nice to see you all, or glad that you could join for this event, and hopefully we'll be able to share some important insights in today's event. Thanks.
Thank you, Nisha. Just a few rules or housekeeping and reminders. We are recording this session, so by being here, you basically consent with this being recorded and part of it. And we will, as usual, with our webinars, also uploaded with our Energypedia website, which we will also go into a bit later on. If you have questions, please put it in the chat or in the Q&A chat. We will collect them and follow up on it later. And then briefly to our agenda. So we will have some opening remarks from our team lead, Björn, and from our UNHCR side, Diana Benato, and some opening remarks from Bettina Schmidt. Then we'll go over to our country insights, which are some insights from our consultants that have done the end-line assessment to this project, and go over to a guided panel discussion with some Q&A from the audience as well. And at the very end, we'll show our Energypedia portal and have some final remarks. So without further ado, I hand over to our team lead, Björn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, that was my mistake. Thank you very much, Keisha. Hello, everyone, and very warm welcome on behalf of GIZ to today's webinar. I'm very happy to see so many people from so many different locations around the world joining the webinar. And I would like to extend a special welcome to our colleagues from our commissioning party, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, who's also with us today. In 2018, BMZ commissioned the partnership program between GIZ and UNHCR in order to make a step towards the realization of the nexus of humanitarian aid, development cooperation, and peace building. As part of this partnership program, the energy component served to support UNHCR in the implementation of their energy strategy until 2025, with the goal to improving the living conditions of refugees and host communities by creating access to safe and sustainable energy. And I'm very glad to say already at this point that within the last 6 years, we've made some significant progress towards reaching that goal. And in the next 1.5 hours, we are very happy to share some crucial lessons learned and insights from our pilot projects in Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And these insights are very important as they will hopefully inform future interventions in similar contexts and with similar goals. We are very happy about the partnership with UNHCR on this matter. And I would like to take this chance to also sincerely thank our commissioning party, BMZ, for the continuous support and guidance throughout the last years, which really was instrumental in reaching our goals. And now it is my pleasure to hand over to Bettina Schmidt from BMZ for some opening remarks. Thank you very much for being with us here today, Bettina. Over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone, and I'm also happy to see so many people online. It's amazing how big the interest is in this topic, and thank you GIZ and UNHCR colleagues for organizing this event today. I'm really curious to learn more about all the results that you have reached. But first of all, thank you for the invitation to give you the introduction words. I hope not to make it too long, so that you have enough time to also discuss and learn from each other today. So maybe as a short introduction to the instrument that I am working for, which is the special initiative Displaced Persons and Host Countries in the BMZ. I don't want to make it too long, just to remind you, I mean, you know it, 87% of more than 120 million displaced persons worldwide live in low and middle income countries, many of them in protracted crisis. And these countries make enormous efforts to host this large number of refugees, despite major challenges in their own countries. Now, with our special initiative, Displaced Persons and Host Countries, the BMZ has a dedicated instrument which delivers a targeted response to the global displacement crisis. In addition to our regular development cooperation, this includes support for both refugees, IDPs, and host communities alike with a multi-sectoral approach, meaning we are actually addressing many different sectors. Our aim is to improve the living conditions of people on the ground in both acute and protracted displacement crisis, thereby creating prospects for living and return in the long term. Just to give you a number of what our instrument has reached, from 2014 to the end of 2023, the special initiative funded approximately 339 projects worldwide with a total investment of 4.6 billion euros. These projects have reached around 38 million people across 78 countries. And so ESDS is one of this. However, we understand our instrument as an HDP Nexus instrument for displacement crisis. What do I mean with this? With our projects, we develop approaches to transition to more development-oriented responses in forced displacement settings and promote durable solutions for refugees and hosts. UNHCR is a very, very important strategic partner for us in the implementation of the HDP Nexus. And especially in the light of the global comeback of refugees, we focused our partnership with UNHCR on the operationalization of the HDP Nexus and set up the global program SUN in 2018, of which ESDS is part of. Together with UNHCR and host governments, we are working to improve the inclusion of refugees in national services such as access to energy, what we're discussing today, health, education, or the labor market. In our joint projects, we link humanitarian and development interventions in a way that we divide labor along our comparative advantages. And ESDS has also shown it in a way, although it is kind of a special cooperation where GIZ is implementing with a strong strong strategic partnership with UNHCR. This gives us the opportunity to learn from each other and to make our response more efficient in the long run. With the energy component, GIZ advised UNHCR technically and strategically on the implementation of its energy strategy from 2019 to 2025. Together, we supported refugees, host communities, and people of concern to meet their energy needs in a safe and sustainable way. The ESDS project piloted innovative energy solutions in 3 key intervention areas. Let me shortly name them, but very shortly, which is policy support, meaning, for instance, developing strategic energy plans that promote self-reliance of the community's energy supply by facilitating local market structures, greening infrastructure, for instance, supporting or especially supporting UNHCR's transition to renewable energy and market efficient practices, including solarization and facilities, and a market-based energy access, meaning improving households and social institutions energy access via market-based and sustainable solutions. we piloted projects to overcome market failures, tackling issues such as e-waste. I'm really proud to say that ESDS improved access to energy for 330,000 people in these last years since 2018. This is an enormous effort, and I want to really thank you for that. And just to give you a few examples, in Uganda, for instance, we improved life-saving access to health facilities. In Kenya, we established new education opportunities in renewable energy technology at the Turkana University College. In Ethiopia, we improved cooking solutions with user-centered design of cook stoves. So I really want to congratulate the colleagues of GIZ and UNHCR for your work, for your efforts, for the successful implementation and partnership over the last 6 years. I think there's lots to discuss today and also to discuss maybe the way forward, and maybe also gaps that you see, that we see, where we can work together in the future as well. So I really don't want to take all the discussions beforehand. So let me just hand over to you. And I thank you again for participating today, and I'm really curious on your reflections. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bettina. And again, thank you for participating today. We're really happy to have you with us. And I quickly pass over to Diana Benato from UNHCR.
But, I mean, I can only echo my colleague that already did a lot of summary of this program that we say already 6-year journey. It's, what can I say? It's always a sad moment when a program ends, like this one, that has been very instrumental to bring some of the changes that we were hoping for. But at the same time, is a good occasion. I mean, programs are made to make themselves unnecessary. Let's say like redundant. So it's also positive that a program come to end. Clearly, difficulty after this long journey, but definitely ESDS leave behind a legacy that Bettina just introduced of topics, insights, and approaches that they were not there 6 years ago, and now we can talk as a very familiar, like the Mark Dave approach. It is definitely something new. For example, the energy, the UNHCR Global Energy Strategy, it was launched in 2019, and now we are talking about clean cooking. We talk about lighting and electrification for household. We talk about solarization for communal facility, for the green, the blue for compounded offices. So that all e-waste is another very, very big topic that was definitely thanks to ESDS and all the activity we had under this umbrella program. So again, a concept of humanitarian development nexus that, let's say, feels like a second nature now, but it wasn't definitely a familiar ground when we start. And even the two organizations, GIZ and UNHCR, they had to learn to work together. We come from two very different worlds. How we operate, how we are, the bureaucracy, how we are organized was very different. It's still very different, but we learn to work together and to know the differences and how to go around these differences. It's not something that came easily. I just remember, like a few months ago, I was in Kenya and I met other colleagues that from GIZ, that they were also there from the beginning of this partnership. And we were talking how 6 years ago, actually, it wasn't easy to collaborate together. It was quite definitely a journey. And there was a new colleague from UNHCR that it was like, oh, I cannot believe of this, because now seems so easy to work together, to put proposal together, and so on. So these are different layers of this legacy that ESDS leave behind. I hope this webinar we will be able to show at least an overview of all the activities. Not easy task to summarize ESDS in 1 hour and a half, but I trust we will at least manage to give a snapshot. So please enjoy the webinar, and that's it. I pass back to you, Keisha.
Thanks, Yana. And also, just for all those interested, we're looking at each other. You can't really see it on the screen, but we're actually in one room in Geneva for this closing workshop. Yeah, just because we wanted to jointly facilitate this and actually be in the same room. But yeah, I pass on to Nishai, and please.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the inputs. I mean, without further ado, I know that what we shared also in our kind of when we invited colleagues for this event, that our promise was to share the technical insights as well from the implementation of the SDS project, and that's why I just to give you a bit of context before inviting our next speaker, is that ESDS was a huge project, also started before COVID, and we have been implementing past few years, and towards the end we wanted to have a good inline review of the whole project, so that not only we could compile all the implementation of the activities, compile all the results from the project, but towards the end we are able to extract lessons learned from the project, and also reach out to again to our partners to get insights into the collaboration we did during the project implementation, and also provide some recommendations for future activities. And for that reason, we were glad to have the support from the development in the form of our consultants who carried out the review, the online review of the project. So I would like to invite now my colleague Priya Shah, who took the lead in this in conducting the online review. And Priya, if you could, you have the floor now, and for a brief presentation, and if you could also quickly say a couple of about yourself, introduce yourself, and carry on with the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Nishay. Can you all hear me? Just want to double check. Okay, thank you, colleagues, for joining us today. I have a feeling I have a bit of a hard task, because doing an inline assessment means you get into the nitty-gritty, you look at all the documents, you talk to lots of people, and you look at the whole range of activities, and you've got 20 minutes to now present maybe the key highlights. So I'm just setting sort of an expectation now from your side. I'll only be diving into about 2 highlights per country. I'll start with Ethiopia, move to Kenya, and finalize with Uganda. And I'll also be touching on a couple of challenges that we uncovered through this process. And they basically help us to also think about the recommendations that I'd like to leave you with. The idea is to give an input so that the discussion that then ensues can be filled with many questions from your side. So if you have questions coming up, just park them and then feed them into the panel discussion that will be taking place right after. So just to mention very quickly, the work that we at B Development did comprised the desk study. It also comprised interviews, both remote and on-site, with a range of partners, but also beneficiaries. And it also comprised an element of a household survey, which at least we could implement in the Gambela region of Ethiopia and in the West Nile region of Uganda. We weren't ourselves on the ground in Kenya, but we drew on the insights from a Kenya-based consultancy company that was also engaged to support the inline from that side. So let's perhaps dive straight in. It's been mentioned already. One of the key highlights, and I've taken liberty to only select those which I feel are very much highlights, is really the UCD approach that was implemented in Ethiopia. Now, that was a very interesting approach because it was an iterative design process which built in users, beneficiaries from both the host and refugee community in the Gambela region, and first brought them together to talk about their issues with regards to cooking, and also engage them in cooking processes so that an expert team could learn about the different meals they cook and the different challenges they face with the type of stoves that they used. Now, all of that experience basically helped to the group, both the technical experts and the refugees and the host communities, to come up with their concept of a dream stove. Now, this dream stove for them embodied many different things. Durability, efficiency, convenience, portability, that you can move it around. And the whole iterative workshop, which ran over several days and in certain moments in time, basically helped to prototype, with the support of engineers and experts, 14 different types of clay stoves. Now, when the prototypes were finished, the same user group who helped to inform the dream stove design were brought back in to do testing. And so they were cooking with these different stoves and basically did a scoring, and that helped to nail down 3 culturally accepted, let's say user-approved stoves. They've been nicknamed the Big J because of the type of mold that is used to produce them. And the 3 stoves basically have the same principal design. One is designed for wood, one for charcoal, and one as a multi-fuel stove. Now, after this design initiative, ESDS colleagues supported capacity building, helping different users and different groups from the refugee and the host community to basically learn how to produce the stoves. And I'm really happy to report that there is actually a woman-led cooperative who is currently operational. It's a 15-member group, and they produce about 15 stoves per member per day, which means there's about 4,500 stoves now being produced. Now, in their support process, sort of like in their process of scaling up production, UNHCR actually came in and helped to do a procurement from them. So 862 stoves were actually directly bought through this support, which ESDS then supported the logistical distribution for. And our household survey and the post sort of user design process has confirmed 100% adoption actually of the Big J. And I think that's quite a remarkable achievement. Now, I mentioned there were 3 stoves, so there's a range of efficiency that has now been computed, but the efficiency is between 21 to 25%, depending on the type of stove being used. And that basically equates to saving about 30% of fuel use. And while my colleague Sandra was in the field just 2 months ago, she was talking to some of the users of these stoves. There was a household survey, and many of the people who are using it have confirmed that it's fully replaced using the traditional 3-stone fire, which I think is really very good. And also it's reduced their firewood collection trips by about 1 per week. They usually go to collect firewood 2 to 3 times a week. So that 1 per week reduction somehow equates also to the 30% that I just mentioned. So that's the UCD. Another very interesting highlight is the multi-purpose energy kiosk, which was set up in Nyunye camp in the Gambela region. Now, this is essentially an adaptation of the traditional energy kiosk approach. It's been adapted in the sense that the facility offers units for 4 different operators. These operators are basically people from the refugee community who have been equipped through the structure and the 3 kilowatt peak system to deliver a range of different services. There's a cinema, maybe it's too extreme to say a cinema, but there's a viewing room with a television. There's a kiosk selling chilled drinks and refreshments. There's a hairdresser salon, and very, very interestingly, there's a little electrical shop whose main sales now is actually doing phone charging. And the interesting thing is our household survey just confirmed that the cost of people going to this solar multi-purpose energy kiosk, the phone charging costs have actually reduced by half. They're able to offer phone charging services for half the cost, which means people are freeing up cash for other essential purchases. The most important thing I think about this initiative is it brings jobs, it brings a sort of a social hub together, people gather. It adds very much to the quality of life for the refugees there, giving them a sort of a break from their other daily hardships. And the cinema is booming quite well in the evening as well. Okay. So on challenges and lessons learned, one of the activities that was actually trialed in Ethiopia was the development of a pilot charcoal briquette production center, which would have offered a fuel solution in the area. And it did become operational for a brief time, but there have been various bouts of conflict which has affected operations and scaling that activity area. So unfortunately, the conflicts got to the extent that the facility was damaged. It is currently under rehabilitation, but it's not yet operational. The other issue with the multi-purpose energy kiosks, I mentioned the phone charging. The phone charging is definitely the booming sort of business at that multi-purpose energy hub. It creates a bit of a problem though, because there's frequent power interruptions because the amount of charging is not now in line, let's say, with the system capacity, which means other operators are affected, especially in the evening. The cinema often doesn't have power. But it's also, this challenge also represents an opportunity because the high demand is definitely something that could be capitalized on in future interventions. From the ICS, from the UCD stove that we showed you a picture of just now, the interesting part there is the 4,500 stoves being produced a month has now got to the point where sourcing of materials to produce the stoves is a little bit more difficult, which means scaling up operations requires more capacity development, more transportation. The cost of transportation is also quite high for the Women's Cooperative. And so there's a need to look at how to scale up those things, especially given the wide adoption that we've just highlighted. Now, given the conflict situation and despite the best intentions ESDS and partners had in Ethiopia, we realized through our assessment that one of the things that wasn't in place at the beginning, although there was a lot of community level consultation also with the refugee and the host community, is there was no attempt to create a user agreement or a community level agreement with all of them together. So that is one of the learnings. As part of the rehabilitation process, those kind of things have now been implemented, and there seems to be a lot more, let's say, mutual consensus between the different groups. So we hope that driving those sort of activities with communities, with those kind of agreements, will help future activities be more successful. Like I mentioned, there's a need, there's an opportunity to expand on this multi-purpose energy hub. There's an aspect of O&M and system sizing that might need to be considered. Our recommendation would be a 5 kilowatt peak system in this case. And the Big J production, I think, has a lot of viability, even possibly beyond the Gambela region. The only thing that I think that needs to be worked on more is really the biomass value chain, so that the adoption of those stoves can also be supported through a sustainable fuel option. So moving on to Kenya. A key highlight in Kenya was the policy development process supported by ESDS, and that basically led to the development of the draft Turkana County Energy Policy. Now, Turkana is in the very north of Kenya. It's a region which has limited grid connectivity and reliability, but is also a high region for hosting refugees, especially around Kakuma, Kalubea settlement, and so on. So this policy is not only important in Kenya's devolution, where the county plays a more prominent role in pushing localized energy solutions, but it's also important for inclusion. The policy we found when talking with private sector has been very interesting because it gives them confidence, it gives them a signal that there is something encompassing any attempt that they would make, which is nested in a real political direction, because the policy prioritizes renewable energy. The support that GIZ has provided actually led to the development of the draft Turkana County Energy Bill, which is now before the Turkana County government, and we expect that this bill will be incorporated into law shortly. GIZ also supported through this project the creation of a county energy database, because of course in the devolution process, if the county has a better awareness of the infrastructure that is there, then it's easier to manage and also see what is required, where the gaps are, and so on. Another key highlight from Kenya, especially in the same region, Turkana County, is the support provided to the expansion of an existing mini-grid. Now, in the area, there were many different mini-grid operators already operational before SUN-ESDS came on board, but one of the issues was that some of the villages that were being served, a mini-grid operator had actually, almost ceased. The supply was not operational because the high demand actually put the system out of use and caused a lot of problems. So what was done here is that there was an interesting RBF approach implemented by SUN-ESDS, which basically saw the financing of a 45-kilometer extension from the Calabea settlement to nearby villages. SUN-ESDS covered 80% of the costs for the developer, and the developer operator covered the other remaining 20%, and there was an incentive placed on connecting as many host and refugee communities as possible. And we've just recently confirmed that there has actually been, through this extension, a number of sort of knock-on effects, and connection has definitely improved in the entire area. There's 3,000 new connections since SUN-ESDS came online. And our household survey and also a recent our interviews and a household survey done by the other consultancy company that was engaged has actually confirmed that there is now 31% electricity access rate achieved amongst the host community and refugee community in Calabea, which includes also 275 businesses and 20 social institutions, and the tariff has been kept quite low. Now, what was interesting about this thing is when ESDS came in to say they're going to finance the extension, the mini-grid operator actually made a strategic decision to lower the connection rates, which actually drove the numbers up. So they reduced the connection rate from 1,000 Kenyan shillings to 500, and numbers rocketed. They've now stabilized. The reason the numbers have stabilized is because the system has reached almost capacity again, which means the mini-grid operator is actually considering to scale up expansion activities at this moment in time. The tariff is quite affordable. The recent assessment on the ground has revealed that the business enterprises that are now connected to this mini-grid have an increased amount of daily operation hours, about 4 hours on average, and that has actually doubled their monthly revenue. So there's amazing things happening on the ground, because by having local enterprises boom, you're creating jobs, you're creating more economic development for both the host community and the refugee community. And it also demonstrates, with the increasing numbers of connections, the willingness to pay and the ability to pay among those people for these connections. One of the things that people have mentioned in particular is that they're very happy with the reliability of the service being provided. So moving on to challenges and lessons learned for Kenya. Although we've got 3,000 connections, most of those connections are basically for lighting and phone charging, especially in the domestic sector. But there are increasing signs of higher tier electricity adoption, especially refrigeration. And that refrigeration is having impacts also for enterprises. They're able to offer more cooling, other types of products, and the power, which is low and medium voltage, is also able to support agri-processing businesses. And so there's really a lot of knock-on effect of this mini-grid being extended and connecting so many people. 3 health centers were also electrified through this mini-grid, and they're now able to offer new diagnostic services such as X-ray. So I think these are very good developments. Now, the risks that we've heard about, especially in our interaction with mini-grid developers in the region, is there's a few issues, and some of these issues were also observed by the colleagues from GIZ-ESDS when they were implementing. One of the issues is the risk of grid encroachment. That means those areas of Turkana County covered by the national grid already that might impinge on the mini-grid operator's territory, and there's no real good solution to that, which means there's a bit of a concern that if the mini-grid starts to expand even more, at which point would the investment not be viable anymore because the grid takes over. It's a very specific issue also in the devolution process because the responsibilities for national grid and local energy development are with different layers of government. So these are things that need to be further addressed. And moving on to the recommendations, I think the mini-grid extension activities show, especially through the RBF and the combined financing, that it's very good to look at how more investments for these kind of things can be pushed, especially in collaboration with donors and other types of financiers. Now, when GIZ-ESDS decided to take on the cost for the 80% of the extension, it allowed the mini-grid operator to look for external financing to work on other improvement and expansion activities as well. So the knock-on effect was an improved overall system. And we think that there's a need to continue looking at opportunities where mini-grids can be developed, where they can be expanded, and where the incentive structures can be set to a point where the affordability can still be ensured to ensure those connectivity numbers. Moving on to Uganda. I know it's a lot to take in. An interesting thing in Uganda is really the solarization of health centers. Now, this was part of a COVID-19 response. It was mentioned earlier that ESDS commenced in 2019. That was just before the pandemic. So the initial time of designing the interventions or starting the interventions, COVID already came in and caused disruptions. So during this time, the colleagues in Uganda decided to look at how to support health centers. Yeah, as part of a critical COVID-19 response. So 3 health centers in Mvepi and Rhino Camp settlements were solarized. They each have a different size of solar hybrid system installed, varying between 3 to 7 kilowatt hours. That has reduced dependency on diesel generators. It has also led to increased operational efficiency. And that is something we confirmed also through household surveys very recently. People are very, very happy with the services being offered because through the solar facility, the health centers have been able to offer and widen their range of services being offered. The outpatient care has massively increased, especially in Ufua at the health center there. 100 patients per day more on average since electrification. There's an increased number of capacity to deliver babies in Siripi. The capacity actually doubled. There's a doubling of monthly baby deliveries because the electricity provides lighting at night, which means staff are able to also, work more efficiently. And the working conditions for the staff have also improved, something that we picked up on during interviews, and that has led to a higher staff retention. Now, the interesting thing is, through all of that, it looks as though some of these health centers are on the trajectory to increase their resources, because they may be reclassified from a health center number 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. And this would basically improve the central allocation of funding provided to health centers in Uganda. The facilities are being used
so,
also.
excuse me, just a
Yeah.
kind reminder, Priya, just a couple minutes left.
All right.
So we have enough time for the
I know.
panel discussion. Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
very good. Okay, so the other thing that was really interesting in Uganda, I'm just trying to make the slide move. There we go, is the RBF scheme. Basically, there was a really interesting RBF scheme implemented for improved cook stoves and for solar home systems and solar lantern sales. The colleagues experimented with different windows, and in the windows, they adjusted the incentives for the suppliers. And through this adjustment, the major incentive change was to increase the let's say, the reward for sales to refugee households, and that actually boosted the performance of the RBF in the second window. And what we've seen is about 3,388 solar product sales have been facilitated. That is a supply-sided, so the price remains the same for the actual consumer, and that has contributed to 23,000 beneficiaries so far in the West Nile region and also in Kiriandongo. The suppliers experimented with pay-go services, which have come in very handy to push sales, and the hybrid RBF in the second phase outperformed the first window by far, and this signals to us that there is an ability to pay and an increasing willingness to pay amongst households for these new products. What they're very happy about, of course, is the convenience and lighting and reliability that they now have at home, especially for phone charging and lighting in the evening. The challenges and lessons learned. One of the things implemented in Uganda was the SERP, which is a Sustainable Energy Refugee Response Plan. And unfortunately, even though the SERP was adopted, the operationalization has been delayed. Colleagues might discuss that further in the discussion in a moment. We've also seen that there is a need to focus more on O&M, especially for improved cook stoves and improved institutional cook stoves being used in schools and in households. That has a lot to do with the sizing of wood going into the systems and also the quality, the maintenance that needs to be done to keep these things functional. We see a huge scaling up potential for market-based solutions, especially the organic demand that we see for those solar home systems, tier 1, which is a panel and 3 light bulbs, really helping them with charging and lighting. And a bottleneck that does remain, based on our conversations with suppliers, is the expensive transportation, the stocking, having to move products from their regional hubs to the settlements and not having localized safe storage facilities. And that's why what we recommend is to scale up those hybrid RBF models and to look at how to scale up affordable pay-go systems and also reduce the transaction costs of those pay-go systems so that people can afford to make repayments without being penalized for it. To improve the last mile distribution, especially through secure warehouses and maybe tricycle sharing, to increase the door-to-door distribution capacity. And on the O&M side, especially with the health centers and the schools, with the solar systems, there isn't a clear strategy yet for how O&M will be financed. And so there is still a continued need to look at alternatives to pooling, maybe on O&M funding approaches. In all, I think there's a lot of highlights and takeaways, and I'm really, really curious what questions you have. And I would like to pass over back to Kissia for the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, Thanks, Priya, for the insightful presentation. I think, yeah, definitely it would be then great to hear also from the country teams who have been implementing these activities, which you also just mentioned. So I'll quickly hand over to my colleague, Keisha, to invite other speakers. Thank you.
Yes, again, thanks. Sorry, that was me. Thanks from my side also. I've already spotlighted the 3 colleagues who will be part of this panel discussion. I think you should be able to turn on your cameras now, also to mute and unmute yourselves. Before we start, maybe perhaps quickly introduce yourselves as well. Bettina is already on her camera, so I'll start with you, Bettina.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, indeed, Bettina Besch-Semorka is my name, and I have been leading the team for energy solutions in displacement settings in Uganda. Thank you.
Shall I continue? Maybe.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine. I joined the ESDS team rather recently, but have been in Ethiopia for 4 years now, working in the displacement sector for GIZ Ethiopia. So it's a real joy to be here with you.
Thank you. I think I proceed. Thank you very much, Keisha and the team for organizing this webinar. My name is Wulkista Kenyi. I work with the GIZ Energy Transport and Climate Change Cluster in Kenya, where I've been coordinating the implementation of the ESDS Kenya component. Looking forward to the discussion. And once again, thank you, Priya, as well, for highlighting some of the work that you have done over the last 4.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing. And hi to everyone. Lovely to have you all here and for making time. I know everyone's busy with clothing, events everywhere. And so let us just quickly jump into these questions. First of all, also as a reaction to what Priya has presented, which highlights and challenges would you like to add, or is there anything particular? And please, yes, just go ahead. Bettina, because I see you on my screen right now.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you as well, everyone, for organizing this webinar. We have just had our closing event this morning in Kampala. At the Kampala level, we had one other one in West Nile region with all districts participating. That we had also worked in during the implementation time. So I think one of the things also fresh from this morning, which also stood out to me, was the reconfirmation by the district local government that, for instance, this health center that has been mentioned as also a highlight of what we have been doing. One of them was specifically mentioned because of the many additional medical services, including blood transfusions and neonatal care, both set up as centers of excellence. And the district local government said currently the accreditation of this health center that started in 2015 as a community health center, 2016, is now of so much value that the district is ensuring that they are looking after it as the government. So it's also even an example of localization, how the transition from the humanitarian side of things being then transitioned to the government of the local government. And I think that's just a highlight that stood out to me, how the efforts are also playing along in these aspects. Also our colleagues, be it also UNHCR from Kampala base, that have definitely said since the refugees in Uganda have been staying on average 5 to 10 years at least. I mean, there are some settlements that have people that have stayed even longer, but it definitely means that we are far away often from the humanitarian aspects, and that really the development aspect is so crucially important. And that was reiterated by so many as well of our guests this morning. Yeah, I think I leave it at that and give the chance also to my colleagues to add a bit of their voice.
Thanks, Kisha. Maybe I can go next. Just let me know.
Yes, please.
All right. So I think for me, first of all, I want to start by providing just a quick clarification on the Kenyan presentation with regards to RBF, and maybe just to clarify that the RBF facility was actually available during the pilot phase of the initial 20 kilowatt peak and 60 kilowatt peak systems that existed before the ESDS project. So this was under the Energizing Development multi-donor initiative that sort of wanted to understand whether mini-grids can actually provide the solutions that are required in the displacement settings. So when the ESDS project came in, our interest was, first of all, to be able to scale up the work that was being done by private sector and attract more of the investment in this context. And then number two, in terms of what the financing looked like, it was a blended financing for the expansion phase, which was interesting for us also because it provided an opportunity to learn what are the pros and cons of having RBF vis-a-vis blended financing when it comes to public-private partnerships for electricity access projects within displacement settings. And then I think the second highlight that I want to provide, also just to touch briefly on what my colleague from Uganda, Bettina, has mentioned with regards to closeout. We had our project closure ceremony on the 14th of November. And I think one of the things we would want to highlight was the interest from the host government in terms of having strategic partnerships, such as what we have seen from ESDS Kenya, or now really to be able to put into action the humanitarian development peace nexus and bringing in different partners, the role of partnerships in being able to, number one, minimize duplication of resources, but also achieve greater socioeconomic inclusion and impact for the targeted beneficiaries. Then the third one, maybe just to highlight as well, is with regards to the energy policy. Originally, as presented, this was 2022, but then of course it didn't really pick momentum. So it is now that we are coming towards the end of the project that the process of finalizing it, which is a very political process, if I may put it that way, has kicked off recently. And we are hoping that, as Priya had mentioned, this would actually be approved for adoption before the end of this year. That is the end game of that. So I think I can stop at that and maybe provide the other insights as we move along. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Christine, please.
Yes,
Over to you.
thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. If I may add from our examples here in Ethiopia, I think what I would like to highlight, in addition to Priya's presentation earlier, is also our policy work. So I think also now looking at that the project is closing, actually the policy work is kind of built a strong foundation that also will now continue to provide a framework for relevant actors to build upon the work that the project has done. So ESDS was the co-chair of the Energy and Environment Working Group, bringing together the humanitarian as well as the development actors in the energy and displacement setting. And two concrete outputs out of this exchange fora were the adoption of the multi-actor cooking energy strategy, which looks at the clean cooking energy gap related to the displacement setting, but also the adoption of the electrification strategy, which addresses the expansion of electricity access for displaced communities, and which is also aligned to the national electrification plan. Both strategies are owned by the Ministry for Water and Energy here and in Ethiopia. And in general, there's also very much at the moment a momentum on the government side in general with regards to refugee inclusion, but it became clear also in the last weeks that one priority here is specifically clean energy and climate action. So yeah, I think these are very relevant and are a great foundation also for further actors and interventions to build upon.
Thank you so much. I mean, just to quickly sum it up, I think one of the highlights of the SES in all of the countries is this very successful working within the HDP nexus, and as also in Uganda, we always say whole of society approach, and great to see not just impacts on the infrastructure level, like on the tangible on the ground, but also to see kind of on the government level and working together with UNHCR, and yeah, all actors, humanitarian development and peace actors working together and seeing it work out so well. And I think that's a good summary to this question. Let me move on to the next one. And I think this is more, please feel free to, raise your hand, whoever would like to answer this one. Just to keep it short, we don't have to answer from each country, but if you will, please indulge us a bit in the market-based approaches, where we've also said, and how Diana also said, that it's becoming more of a word now, and how any further inputs on how market-based approaches and the private sector engagement worked within the SCS. Would anyone else like to jump in on this question?
I'm really happy to do that. I think also because Priya was also highlighting that the RBFs were quite successful with their challenges that we had. And I think the results-based financing was also a link to the other infrastructure that we had put up in the model, which was our energy kiosk model, and that would never have succeeded if we wouldn't have put also the value chain in place, so that the private sector would deliver high quality products to the refugee settlements. And as she also pointed out, it's not even very easy. I know she has left out a few pointers on challenges as well, because it's quite a dynamic situation, different levels where these energy kiosk teams reached in terms of their professionalism, but also their ability to be a sales agent for these results-based financing partners. However, I think I would also like to say another example, because for us in Uganda, we also said we are going to support the efforts of building mini-grids in the refugee context, different size of mini-grids than in Kenya, just because our settlements are very different. And we were able to link up with another program by GIZ that had already established mini-grids in the same district. And so it was an opportunity to say, yes, let's, as I usually say, we annexed ourselves to that program. And what we realized on these market-based approaches, it also takes a lot of time. So our mini-grids are almost ready, and we worked on it many years. Delays came through different angles, even to secure the financial close by our private sector partner took longer than anticipated. Then there were delays in shipping and delays in basically at every step. And I think that's also interesting to note, because depending on which project we are starting or considering, that some of these energy solutions, especially if they're slightly of bigger size, that they take more time than we would maybe anticipate, and the 5 years of our ESDS program of real implementation was almost too short. And I think that's just also something that we have to recognize in our context. But of course, we hope we will be faster next time around, because while these longer term engagements had to happen, it also built a capacity within our own ministries and within the sector. So yeah, those are a few remarks. Over to Wilkista.
Yes, and before Will Custer jumps in, just another reminder, if anyone from the audience has questions, please feel free to put in the chat or in the Q&A section. And over to you, Will Custer.
Thank you very much, Kisha. I think I just wanted to add a few things. Number one is, of course, when we're engaging the private sector and thinking about market-based approaches, one of the challenges that I'd want to highlight as an input here is how do we reach the most vulnerable in a market-based approach? I mean, this is a conversation that has come up. We had an endline focus group discussion with the community beneficiaries, and it is a topic that came up. So, for example, in a market-based approach, we are basically also looking at the willingness of the seller versus the buyer. But then, so we are already thinking about aspects of willingness to pay and ability to pay. But when you think about the vulnerable segments of the already fragile context, then there are people who might not be able to pay for these services. So how do we really ensure that the solutions are targeting everyone and that you're leaving no one behind within a market-based ecosystem? And then I think number two is on what Priya had mentioned earlier with regards to grid encroachment risk, which is obviously a risk for the private sector, willing to invest in such contexts. And maybe just to highlight that Kenya currently has the draft mini-grid regulations, which unfortunately have not yet been gazetted. But I think there is deliberate push really to be able to gazette it because of also the critical role that mini-grids play in terms of achieving our universal national electrification strategy. So not just within the displacement context, but looking overall in all of Kenya's off-grid regions, who obviously are the most difficult to reach segment of the population. And then I think lastly is to just echo out what Bettina from Uganda mentioned with regards to time. Obviously, these interventions require time. I mean, it's a challenge we have seen, for example, when we are trying to create an enabling environment for private sector investments, then the policy processes, as we have seen in the case of Kenya, and also lagging between when the policy or the strategic plans are actually approved versus the implementation period. So there tends to be sort of lengthy processes and time, which we cannot be able to factor in within the nature of commissions that usually are typically, you can go for a maximum of up to 5 years, for example. So, and by that time, you might not necessarily have achieved what was intended by a specific policy outcome that is targeting private sector investments in terms of creating the enabling environment for them. So I think that would be the input that we have from Kenya based on the experience we've had working with the actors here. Over to you.
Thank you, Wilkes and Bettina. Christine, would you like to add something on this particular question? If not, I don't see her hand or anything because I'm presenting the screen right now. Christine, no? Okay. I am just looking at the time, and I think I would like to make some space for, I'll skip a couple questions, and I would like to make space for what would you like to say as this journey is coming to an end. And Christine, I think I mean, yes, you just joined recently, as you said, but I think I'd like to start with you, with Ethiopia, or also colleagues from Ethiopia. Please jump in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think I also just saw the first question in the chat already, and I think it ties in also very much to this question now. I think looking at the ESDS project, it's very unique in that it is an example of implementing the Nexus by its very nature of how it was designed, which has a lot of potentials, but also, of course, comes with a set of challenges. Yeah, I think looking at it, I think it's successful in how it kind of piloted the Nexus and showed that it is possible. Yeah, having the more humanitarian displacement setting, but then bringing in a development lens through, for example, the market-based approaches, but also, for example, looking at the solarization of health centers, which I think do give kind of a pathway of how we can also contribute in protracted crises to more sustainability and less burden on the humanitarian setting. So I think there are a lot of learnings, of course, like we also now have heard from the presentations and the discussions, and a lot of potential to really build upon these lessons learned. So I think it has been kind of shown that it can work, that it does work. It's not always easy, but it's worth to do it, and it would also now need, of course, more efforts to build upon it and to scale it up. Yeah.
Thank you. And yes, I quickly already hand over to the next speaker, Bettina or Wokissa. What would you like to say as this journey is coming to an end?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm just very grateful for all the partnerships that we have built. Starting with UNHCR, I think we were almost a little bit emotional today, how nice our collaboration in Uganda has actually worked out. Also with the Office of the Prime Minister, our line ministry, which is Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, and how far we have come despite the challenges that we have actually also mentioned. And I think also to the question a little bit, because yeah, the HDP Nexus can work. We were asked to come with advisory services as well as supporting, as we already indicated, the private sector, for instance, or another partner, still the civil society, that are very well known on the ground with our, yeah, how should I say it, supporting the beneficiaries. So, they have some trust built with the communities. And it is important to note that, like, for instance, in this case that I just mentioned with the mini-grids, that there have been so many delays. And it is actually still our partner, AFSI, that had really been able to already convince the businesses on the ground to purchase electrical appliances, even though the power is not yet flowing. So this is amazing partnerships that have really, where we are building on the benefits and the skill sets of everyone that we have been engaging with. And I would like to say thank you for everyone who's on the call and has heard it now, but also we will pass it on again at a different moment.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the three of you for making the time, for speaking and sharing everything from your journey.
I think,
please stay tuned because
sorry, Kisha. Yeah, I think sorry, I hadn't responded to that question yet.
Sorry, my bad.
But I'll try and make it very brief. Yes. No worries. Yeah, so I think
we make time for you for sure.
All right. So I think first of all, of course, is to thank the actors that we have worked with over the last 6 years. Of course, for some of us, it has been a shorter period, but I know there are colleagues in the room who have been around for a relatively longer time. And in terms of what we take away or what we'd like to say as this journey comes to an end, number one for me is on financial inclusion, because really, when we're thinking about energy access, and especially from the infrastructure side, then we have to talk financial inclusion for refugees. And what we have realized over the years is refugees are indeed a resource that can contribute meaningfully to local economic development of the target regions. But then, of course, there's always the challenges that we have to grapple with, which are the non-energy nexus issues. But I also want, I think, to use this opportunity to try and demystify, so hopefully I get it right, the understanding of market-based approaches vis-a-vis how we approach it within a humanitarian setting. I know one of the questions we've been having, and we've had this discussion, including with UNHCR colleagues, Diana, when you were in Nairobi earlier this 2 months ago, is whether there's actually a business case when we are actually looking for grants or guarantees to be able to de-risk private sector investment. And this is not necessarily for energy, but even for financial instrument in terms of commercial lending institutions that can actually respond towards end user financing, because at the end of the day, if we are going to catalyze the market, then we also have to think about the businesses and how they access the resources as well as the users. So I think for us, one of the things we'd like to highlight, or rather to demystify, is that there has to be a starting point when establishing a market. And in the case of the humanitarian setting, this is a young market which is looking to grow. So we are more of a frontier market, if you may look at it that way, that still needs to be enabled so that it can actually grow into a market that can exist by itself. And like any other market that is under development, there always has to be instruments within the national ecosystem. For example, when you look at utilities, this always comes from the government side in terms of cross subsidies, for example, just so that the infrastructure aspects can be set up, and then you let the operations then run themselves sustainably over the long run. But somebody has to take care of the infrastructure to be able to really build that market. So we would want to see actually more deliberate blended financing mechanisms coming into play, just to be able to really set up that market so that it can exist by itself in the long run. And then I think number 2 is to highlight the role of partnerships, which we have already spoken about. But for us, thinking about the partners that we've managed to work with over the last couple of years, I think in Kenya, we managed to work with at least 10 partners. It was not always easy. Each partner has their own different way of working. So trying to bring in 10 different institutions in the same room to jointly plan activities and to jointly, where possible, put resources together so that we try and minimize duplication, which I mentioned earlier, was not always the the easiest of tasks. But I think it is very important, even as we conclude, on being able to, number one, co-create with the partners and identify the unique strengths that they bring to the table in terms of being able to achieve the overall objective of the project. So I think I can stop at that. And of course, we are happy to take any other questions post this webinar. Thank you very much. And back to you.
Thanks, Waltessa, and apologies again. My moderating brain was already running with the time, but please stay tuned. Thanks again to all the speakers. We will open up this question round to the audience, and I pass over to my co-moderator, Nisha.
Many thanks. As expected, very useful insights. It's for me personally, I think always also it's really always useful, and also I'm really grateful to hear all these the lessons learned and how we talk about the implementation and the partnerships which we forged over the time, and also the collaboration we did. And I mean, that's also I think the colleagues which also addressed partially in terms of why this is important, and when we talk about implementing market-based energy access in displacement settings. So I see some of the question, or at least one question from our colleague Eva. But if in case there are any questions, please feel free. Please also feel free to add to the chat box or raise your hand. But yeah, I will quickly look at the questions and also invite colleagues if they want to provide any inputs to that. So I mean, going to the question posted by Eva first, I think it's also really it kind of, I think, partially addressed as far as I understand, because we also spoke about the implementation in HDP Nexus. We talked about different interventions and also the importance of collaboration for that. Eva, I don't know if you want to yourself add to that. Otherwise, happy to move over to colleagues, or if they want to provide an input to this. If not, anyone would maybe talk quickly about the cooperation on the ground, if you want to highlight anything to achieve the energy access goals. Maybe.
Just to jump in, I think a lot of what the colleagues have already said before was answering quite a few of the questions that Eva was kind of regarding asking for. I think perhaps we should move on to one of the other questions, unless if Eva still feels like it needs to be addressed, we can follow up later. But I think a lot of the cooperation was what the colleagues have been mentioning before. So I think there's one question in the Q&A that was asked already a couple minutes ago, Olivia. Who owns and manages the kiosk, and how are the O&M costs taken care of? May I pass this on to the colleagues in the companies who have energy kiosks, so Bettina or Christine, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the very beginning also, because when we were choosing the energy kiosk management teams, they had a right to use the kiosks until we realized, you know, they were now ready to own it properly. And that is also because we have to get permission from our line ministry. So just that's a bit of a rule. So the energy kiosk management teams may consist of refugees only or host community members only, but very often we had actually a mix of it. And so the management, it really depended also partly on the group. Sometimes we had very strong leaders that had run this type of business before, but on much smaller scale. And they became then maybe the chairpersons of that particular group, and were assigning then tasks to the other members. For instance, let me say if they had what they call the IT department, then someone was in charge of organizing the computer trainings, and those ones who had the computer trainings, depending on their setup, but I give one example, that they had a performance-based pay. So like if they had per trainee, they would get 30% of the income from these computer trainings. And so then the question of operation and maintenance costs, yes, it's exactly therefore also with that particular group. They are owning it, they are making money, partly also money that is right away a profit if it is related to phone charging, for instance, because the power is used to do this service and then get in direct income. And then none of these kiosks had to replace their batteries yet, but that will come. They are aware. They are supposed to save up in maybe bank accounts. It attracted actually also a lot of other additional interest. So for instance, we gave a bit of support on the side of phone charging, as we said, or cold drinks, and the trainings or for secretarial services, as we say, so they can do printing and computer trainings and maybe writing of documents, etc. But then, for instance, they have become agents for banks in the meantime, because it was a reliable power source. So the banks said if they are interested to partner with them. And so there's another additional source of income. So every kiosk is a little bit different, but in general, just to answer again your question on who owns and manages these kiosks, in our case, is community groups. Not all of them have succeeded, by the way. And then O&M is also, as we said, their own task. Thank you. Over maybe to the Kenyan team. So,
Bettina, if I may follow, I think our example in Ethiopia is very similar. So they are also operated by community group, and they generate a profit through the various businesses that are hosted by the energy kiosk, and are paying out of this profit the operational and maintenance costs. But I also want to highlight, similarly to the Ugandan case, it has also not yet been necessary to replace any bigger, so to say, infrastructure, like, for example, battery, or invest in bigger infrastructure. So I think this is also a continuous process to further strengthen their capacities, and also to support them to prepare for kind of these shocks that will likely come at some point, and then need to also be covered by them. Yeah.
Thanks. I think this question does not apply to Kenya, so Kisha, will hand it back to you.
Exactly, thank you. Now I left space for you, but yeah, there were no energy kiosks in Kenya. But I remember, I see Andrew Mswigwa had an open hand earlier in the webinar. I don't know if you still have a question, if you would like to ask the question, or if that was just a raised hand that was accidentally raised.
And also, apologies that some of you couldn't, unmute yourself. Please feel free to raise your hand as I posted in the chat in case you have any questions, so we'll be able to unmute you.
And if not, if you're too shy to raise anything, we're always still here. You can email us or put questions in the chat. And as said already, many times we'll collect it and then answer it and put it part of the webinar kind of summary and email it to all the participants in a couple of weeks. But speaking of questions that you might still have, or if you're just interested on finding more details out on the different activities in the 3 different countries, this is a good time to show you our Energypedia portal. I hand over again to Nisha, or your screening. So I don't know if you've heard of Energypedia, but also Energypedia has been helping us facilitating this webinar today and our past webinars as well. So thank you to the Energypedia team as well. It's basically like Wikipedia, but specifically for energy. And this is where we have been keeping all of our what we call knowledge products, but also more information to come. We've already had a couple of articles in the past, so this has been existing since basically the beginning of the project. And I will hand over again to Nisha to go through just the landing page for you to be able to find where the different things are.
Thanks, Kisha. As said, there are a lot of information coming out from the project implementation, which we tried to cover in today's webinar, provide you with the highlights and some success stories and recommendations for future initiatives. But also we do want to continue the knowledge we have gathered, and also compile the information from the N-Liners assessment, which will be also uploading in the coming days to this portal. But just wanted to present that to ensure that the continuity of the information we have gathered. We have prepared the portal. We collaborated with Energypedia team to design this and also upload all the information. The information here is also categorized based on the themes we worked on, including electrification, market-based access approaches. There's also information on cooking energy and e-waste topics, which we also discussed during the webinar. Some of the information which you also find interesting could be also regarding operation maintenance and finance, and also our policy work these are links provided, and also some of the results of the project are added as well as part of ESDS milestones or infographic sheet, which you'll also find on the portal. So, I mean, we have put a bit of work into this. We have shared also, we have some of our impressions from the project. Please, yeah, I would suggest if you are interested, if you have time, please go through, or happy to access this portal. That would be really appreciated. And just to remind again that we'll be uploading in the coming days the final deliverables from the N9 assessment, which Priya presented shortly. So I will end this presentation, and I will then invite again maybe Björn and Diana to present some of the final closing remarks before we end this presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nishai. It's actually not so much for me to add to this, but to thank you all for your participation in this very interesting event, and a special thanks to our panelists, and but in extension also to all the country teams, both of GIZ, UNHCR, and all other colleagues who have been involved in implementing our projects. Thank you very much. Thank you very much also to B Development for presenting their very interesting insights. I'm very confident that we have a very good approach to, in this case, really ensure the knowledge continuity and make sure that all of those insights, experiences, and lessons learned will help to shape our future interventions in this area. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Over to Diana, please.
I'm really closing the closing event. I can only also thank everybody. Has been, as I repeat again, a remarkable 6 years journey. I want to thank the people that they were there at the beginning, that they really started this program, the one that they were in the middle implementing, and the one that around the closure. What can I say more than this? I repeat, the legacy it's there of this program. We talk about humanitarian and development nexus. The dream, let's say, is that we will not talk about humanitarian energy anymore or development, but we talk about what are the best solutions for the people that we want to provide a change. So again, we went 1 hour and a half. We spoke about many of the solutions already. Not to think like how to provide this solution, but to think like how the people that we want to provide this solution, what they need, and how we can best support them. So I'm not repeating what we did for 1 hour and a half. It will be recorded. It's be recorded, and will be uploaded on NHPedia. So I'm very happy about this website that we have, because I go back constantly. I'm looking for documentation. So please, yes, you show the link, so very well. And everything that we did has been documented and it's uploaded there. So for sure, we can go back to look at it. So thank you again for everybody that has been here in this journey. And I definitely closed the webinar. The program.
Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. I